Another brand new Flex tool on their 24 volt lineup. This is the FLEX FX7441. It's their 12-inch compound miter saw. Now, much more than just a compound miter saw. It bevels both ways. Miters both ways from 52 degrees on the left to 60 degrees on the right. And even a patented feature on here with a couple of more features that make this really easy to use. Let's dig in, take a closer look at this. And by the way, we've also got something else brand new. It's their 24 volt, really 120 volt to 24 volt AC DC adapter. So you never have to worry about running out of cuts, even though their 10 amp hour battery is supposed to give you up to 630 cross cuts. This is the brand new FLEX FX7141. It's their 12-inch miter saw. Now this both compound bevels and compound miters, so it goes both ways. Actually 60 degrees to the right on the miter and 52 degrees to the left on the miter. And then we have bevel to the right and bevel to the left. It runs on the 24 volt Flex platform, so you can get it kitted with the 10 amp hour stacked lithium battery, or you can get it as a bare tool where it just comes along as the saw. Now the really cool thing about this is not only are they releasing this saw, but at the same time they're releasing the AC/DC power adapter. Now this is a 2000 watt power adapter, so this is going to go in the battery slot. And then we have a power adapter we can plug into the wall. So if you're in those high demand situations and you have an outlet nearby, you don't have to run on battery power. You can use the power adapter to power the saw. Now that will also work great on something like a table saw as well that they just released two of. Now obviously we get a brushless motor that's powering this 12-inch saw blade. And by the way, it comes with a 60-tooth saw blade. So that's a great crossover between cutting lumber and being able to cut some nicer, crown molding baseboard, things like that, your finer woods. So a great crossover blade. So glad to see it comes with a 60 tooth. But there's some really cool features on this saw that let's dig in and take a closer look at each of these and see what we think. Now this is a sliding miter saw, so we have the two rails right here with a thumb lock right there. If we loosen this up, we'll see that this glides very easily on those two rails. So if we're cutting something, small, not much capacity, we can lock it down here and just pivot. But if we're cutting those long, say 14-inch reaches, we can open that up, be able to slide this out and get that full capacity. Our battery mount is right here behind the trigger. Slide that on, so it's going to stay out of the way. It's not protruding out anywhere. It goes right behind where the handle is. The pivot lock for the saw is right here at the pivot point, and just relieve the pressure on the saw by pulling down just a touch, and this pulls out very easily, moves out about a 1/4 inch, and then you can actually pivot the saw, pull it back down, little pressure, push that in, and now it holds that in place. The trigger on the saw does have a safety feature. Some call this a dead man switch, and it only pivots to the left if you're holding this with your right hand, so you'll slide that over and then you can actually pull the trigger. Otherwise, that locks out the trigger. You do have to flip that over and then engage the saw. Now the base of the saw is about 27 inches wide on the table. However, you can quickly change that. These little cam locks right here just fold right out, one on either side, and you can slide these tables out. And then we quickly go from 27 inches to almost a 40-inch width. Now, overall dimension of the saw, from if the saw slid all the way back, from back to front, it's about 42 inches. And height on this is about 20 inches when down, and all the way up about 29.5 inches. This saw does weigh about 50 pounds. I believe it's like 48.1 pounds. But add a couple of pounds for the battery and you're definitely going to be in that 50-pound range. And just like the table extensions, it's very easy to adjust your fence as well. One on either side, these little cam locks, flip it down. You can adjust this in and out where you need it, lock it back down. Or if you want to, open that up, slide your fence off, and then you can easily put that back on. And again, lock that down. There's also a place on either side of the saw, and that's where your clamp is going to go on, and it uses that knurling as it puts pressure on there against it like this, holds that into place, which is a very effective design, by the way. And right here on the, if you're facing the saw on the right-hand side behind the fence is where you will find the Allen wrench, and that will help you with adjustments as well as installing the blade as well. So you have the large Allen wrench on one end, on the other end a smaller hex. So again, that's going to aid you in all your adjustments as well as blade changes. Now this next feature is something that I believe is overlooked a lot on saws that actually have these, and that is the depth stop. So right here is your adjustment for your depth stop. Well, you see it's really not doing anything right now. That's because this little tab is folded back. If I fold it down, now we're actually engaging that depth stop. Well, if I'm cutting a lot where maybe I'm cutting some channel or dido and some wood because I don't want full capacity cut, and then I need to make an actual cross cut, I don't have to adjust this or unadjust that. I can just flip this back down, and now I can make my through cut and then flip that back down, and now I'm down to my depth stop again. Another unique feature on this saw is this spindle lock. So if I need to lock out the blade, I need to change the blade, I don't have to find a groove. I can just flip this down and then watch when I turn this blade. There, it found the lock. Now I can change the blade out. Flip it back up, and now I'm free to go. Again, flip it up. There, it finds a lock point, and I'm good to go. So I don't have to push a button in and hold it while I'm trying to turn the nut or the arbor bolt. I can just flip that down. It's going to find that lock, and we're good. When I'm done, flip that up, and now it's going to be free spinning again. We have a dust port here on the rear of the saw. Internal dimensions on that is 1.25 inches and external 1.5. So 1.5 internal, 1.5 external. And we also get a dust extraction adapter as well, which obviously is going to be 1.5 on the inside because it's going to go over the top of that. And then here on the big end, it's going to give you your 2.25, 2.3 inches, 2.5, a little more than 2.5 on the external. Now you have several different options for actually bolting down this base or clamping down the base, but if you're using this like most others, you're probably laying this on a work surface and going to town. And if you do that on a large compound miter like this, it can get very front heavy and actually kind of kick forward. Well, that's the great thing. You have a little kickstand right here. I call it a kickstand. I'm sure it's probably called something else. And so you can put that down and adjust it to where, I like to do it to where it's just touching the base, because if you put it too tight where it's actually lifting it up, then when you go to actually cut your miters, it will actually drag on your work surface. So I just kind of put it down to where it almost touches or just touches, and then again, as you slide forward, it kind of gives you that kickstand effect and doesn't let it wobble. And speaking of miter, very easy to adjust your miter. So you just push this button right here, slide it left or slide it right, and then you have detents built in. So right now I'm at 0, and if I want to adjust, just push the button, turn it left, and I can release the button right now, because once it finds that next detent, it will automatically pop into place. There it goes, pops into place, and now I'm at my 15 degrees. The next one will be at 22.5 degrees. So now I'm there, and then again at 31.6, and then finally at 45. And as I mentioned, I can go past 45, there's just no detent there, and I can go to the full 52 degrees to the left. Now before we get into using this saw, let's talk about setup. And I'm not going to get too deep in the setup because you can get as deep as you want to. There's other videos that cover this, but I would cover an entire video just doing that. But out of the box, you want to make sure of a couple of things, because if these two things are not pretty spot on, then the rest of your adjustments are going to be really almost null and void. First off, you want to make sure that your table is pretty level across from the center platform that pivots, as well as your left and right table. And you want to make sure that one's just not kicked up higher than the other. This one looks pretty good. I'm not going to use a feeler gauge. You can see kind of by the naked eye, by the camera, there's really no big gaps. For the most part, framers are going to be absolutely happy with this. Now, some of you finish carpenters may want to get into the details of 2 3/1000ths of an inch and use your feeler gaugers. That's great. I just wanted to make sure, are there no big headaches that I have to worry about out of the gate? And I don't. So that's the first thing, making sure that your table is nice and flat across all 3 of these planes. And by the way, I'm using a drywall square. You could use a level, just something with a nice straight edge. Again, you can get some more specific straight edges for actually doing this, and by all means, you're welcome to do so. So we've made sure of our flatness. Now we want to make sure that our fence is, again, on this same exact plane. We want to make sure that one's not kicked in, one's not kicked out, but it's kind of straight across. Let's remove these numbers. There we go. And we can see, for the most part, again, we're pretty good. I can look down on here. I really see no gap. Because, again, if the fence is off, if one side is different than the other, you may be making right-hand cuts and everything's fine and switch to doing left-hand cuts, and all of a sudden your degrees are off and something's gone wrong, or your 45 is not a 45. That's why the fence is actually out. So make sure those 2 are good and you're good to go. Now, if your table's actually out of whack, that may be a little bit of adjustment you have to dig into, or you may want to just send it back. If your fence is out of whack, you can actually remove the fence here. There's 2 screws back here. You can loosen those up and actually adjust them. Be careful not to do that unless you actually need to. And if you do need to, you probably already know how to do what I'm talking about. So no big deal. Just make sure that that fence is in line with one another, because they are 2 different fences. They are not connected. Now, since we can now index off of our fence and off of our table, now we can worry about adjusting our actual miter points as well as our bevel points also. And again, I'm not getting too detailed into here, but now let's close the saw down and let's raise up the guard. I do not have a battery in there. The battery's right here, so nobody freak out yet. And now I'm just going to take a simple, I'm going to take a speed square and I'm going to lay it against the fence and make sure that I don't have any bad gaps into the squareness of that. So kind of I'm validating that I'm on 0. As you can see there, I've got a bad gap right there. If I was on negative, then again, bad gap back in the back. So at 0, how close are we to 90? And I feel like I'm pretty good there. Again, if I'm cutting raw lumber, it's probably absolutely fine with me. And if not, this little stainless steel ring here on the front of the unit with the detents in it, this is where you would loosen these up and adjust them. Just be careful. Do those minimal at a time to adjust where your detent is actually at 0, and then go from there. And if you want to, after checking 0, you could go to your 45, and you could make sure that you're actually cutting at a 45 as well. Go back and do your other 45. Come in here and check that. If I want to, I could slide this forward. My gap seems pretty consistent all the way down there. And again, there are better squares for doing this. There are the woodpecker squares and everything else for actually dialing these in, but I'm not getting into that here at the moment. And then you want to make sure your bevel adjustment, you're at 0, so you can take you a square, put it up against there, and make sure, again, you're zeroed in there. You could have taken the same speed square and done the same thing, and kind of validating that, again, you're at 0. There's also a bevel adjustment in the back that you can take off the plate and actually access. Again, I'm not getting into all that. That's in the manual to adjust that. This thing is pretty true right out of the box. So I'm definitely within any range of, like I mentioned, that any framer, anybody cutting raw lumber, you're going to be absolutely fine with. In fact, many of your finished carpenters will be fine with it as well. Now back here on the back, this is our bevel gauge, so we can see left and right bevel. And it's very easy to make changes to this. In fact, this is one of their patents on this, and it's a pretty cool design. So if this lever is pushed all the way back, it's locked into place, so it's not going anywhere. If I lift it forward, now I can move it. If I pull it all the way forward and hold it there, Now I'm free to range wherever I want to. Left and right. If I release it, it's going to find its next stop. There we go. So you see it clicked into place, and now it's locked in at 22.5 degrees. Pull it forward, and it will find its next lock again. Push it back, and that locks it down. Lift it all the way forward, go where you want to, release it. We'll find its next stop and lock into place. Pull it forward. Again, finds its next stop at 45 and locks into place. Hold it forward, and now I'm free to roam wherever I want to. Release it, and again, it's going to lock. And as I was mentioning, if you want to adjust and tune your bevel, you take these two screws out here, and behind there, there's two lock screws. You loosen those, and then you do your adjustments right here on either side. Rather than going through all the cut capacities of this saw, I think I'm just going to throw up a table here that kind of shows you all the max cut left and right. If you want to pause that, screen cap it, you can definitely do so. Otherwise, it would just be a lot of verbal nonsense that maybe you don't want to hear. Now, this does come with a dust bag, but I would highly recommend, if you don't want dust everywhere, if dust is going to bother you, I would hook up a dust extractor and try to pull everything we can from it. We're probably still going to see some residual on this large miter. Now, I will tell you, talking about tuning your saw, if you have a piece of wood and you know the sides are parallel, so in other words, you know that these two sides are perfect, near perfect, whatever, what you can do is just lay it up there. Let's put on our battery. Turned our dust extractor on, so it may be a little loud, and I'm just going to split this wood. By the way, not a lot of dust. I like it. Also, not a lot of tear out from that 60-tooth blade. I like that as well. So we've got those two pieces. Obviously, they match up well because we just made a slice through there. You'll take this, flip it upside down, put it together, measure your gap in between. That'll tell you of whether or not you're on point for your zero. You can see I've got some bowing in the wood, but really no gap. Maybe just a touch on this side. So I am well within typical cutting conditions for a tuned saw. You can also do the same thing by standing this up, making a cut, and then flipping this, and this is just going to check your bevel and looking for a gap there as well. Looks like I have a tiny one here at the bottom. So again, if you're worried about cutting your crown moldings, things like that, do your adjustments to your bevel and you'll be good. So a couple of things here. I've got a 1x12 right here, and I want to show you a couple of things. Number one, if I turn this on, you see we get a shadow line here. So we don't have a laser pointing the one side or the other. We actually get a shadow line of the blade. That's done by this LED light here on the top, shining right directly down on the blade and getting that true straight line all the way across. Now, we can just naturally let that work. When you pull the trigger, it will turn on and stay on for 5 or 6 seconds and then go out. But you can also just turn it on just with the touch of a button here on the top of the unit as well. So we get a nice shadow line. I love that. It actually tells you where the blade is and not just one side or the other. And the other thing is I have my dust extractor off. Let's see how much residual we get on a couple of cuts here. So a lot more dust. Dust extractor back on. So even though we're not absolute perfection when it comes to extracting all the dust off of that blade, it's doing a great job of it, much better than not running it at all. So I highly recommend you use an extractor. And in addition, that blade stop. So a little longer than a second. Full speed, 1001, so less than 2 seconds, full stop on the blade. That takes a lot of power to do that, by the way. So it's utilizing the power in that brushless motor to not only spin it up, but also slow it down. And as far as the max RPM, 1001, so it seems both. Speed up to max 4,000 RPM in less than 2 seconds, slow down and stop in less than 2 seconds as well. So kudos on that. Couple of things here. I've got just a raw 3x4, so literally almost 4 inches wide, 3 3/4 by a little over 3 inches. So I believe this is probably dissected from a pallet. Regardless, show a couple of cross cuts here. Cut through that knot. And now I wanted to actually show you in motion the depth stop. So if I flip my depth stop forward, we'll see when I pull it all the way down, the blade stopping prematurely, obviously at a certain height. In fact, let me give that a little more. So we'll stop it a little higher. And I'll just make a couple of grooves in this wood and show you something. So again, my blade stops down here. Let me turn the dust extraction on. So now I've cut my little dido there, and I want to actually cross cut this again. Flip this over. So that's utilizing that depth stop without having to readjust my depth. I just flip that open and now I can make my through cut, and then I've got my dido there already cut. And then if I wanted to make a compound miter in this 3x4, no problem. Well, our thoughts on this is there's plenty of power on tap with the 24-volt battery to make the cuts you need, whether it's through PT lumber or whether it's through thicker hardwoods. This saw is going to be able to do it. Also, out of the box, as far as the setup on it, very minimal. Everything was kind of in place and definitely close enough that most of your or all of your framers and a lot of your finish carpenters would be absolutely fine with it. And if you are more keen on setting up those perfect cuts, and you're already used to actually dialing those things in, and FLEX makes it easy to do so, at least if you know what you're doing. And by the way, in the manual, it's got all of those from the miter to the bevel, as well as setting out the fences. Everything is right there in the manual to walk you through doing it as well. Pricing on this is $599 for the bare tool. When you look at a cordless compound miter saw, especially in a 12-inch variety, that price is not out of range at all. And if you buy it with the kit with a 10 amp hour stacked lithium battery and a charger, you're looking at $799. So you're going to add $200 to that. Now, it comes with a standard 5-year warranty. However, if you'll sign up, I believe it's within 30 days of purchasing this, and sign up online, you can get the Founder's Warranty, which gives you a lifetime warranty on the tool as well as the battery and the charger. So be sure to sign up within 30 days of purchasing that tool. We think this is a great addition. We love the AC/DC adapter, especially for large demand tools like a 12-inch miter, like the table saws that they recently came out with. By the way, you can check those reviews out right here on Shop Tool Reviews as well. And look for this to release in February. They're saying February 1 on the saw and the AC/DC adapter. It may be a few days after that, but look for these in February of this year. Also, keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and even TikTok. And if you don't mind, would you hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already? And by all means, if you hated our review of this FLEX FX7441, then give us a thumbs down. But would you let us know in the comments why? Have a great day. Keep smiling.